Hi everyone, it's Yvette Blowitz from SPAITGIRL.com. Welcome to the Spirit Girl Talk Show podcast. I'm super excited to be here with you today in this online audio space and with our very special guest, and her name is Bev Aisbett, and she is an illustrated self-help book author who specializes in anxiety, depression, and other related issues. She has now written 17 books. She has so many books that are out on the bookshelves at the moment. And Bev, I just want to welcome you to the Spirit Girl podcast show and thank you for being here with myself and the audience today.
Thank you, Yvette. We got there eventually. It was a bit anxious making, wasn't it?
Yeah, my technical glitches from my end, and not to forget that there's daylight savings between Queensland and you're based in
Victoria. Yeah. And it's also hay fever season, so bear with me if I'm a bit nosy, which I am. So all in all, we'll get there.
So for our listeners, can you tell them a little bit about yourself and your story and what inspired you to want to become a self-help author?
Well, all of my books are written from lived experience. So back in 1991, I developed very, very severe anxiety, panic attacks, the whole works. And this came on when I decided to take the plunge into being a freelance illustrator, and I already had a client base, but I went to Sydney to the Stanley Awards, which is a big black tie affair for cartoonists, and it was my first time there, and I just did not enjoy myself that night. I was just on edge, and the next day I went to the annual general meeting, and I was sitting there and I had my first panic attack, and it was just overwhelming. I spent the rest of the day walking around Sydney Harbour, stopping at a few bars on the way, I might say, to try and calm my nerves, but I didn't know what was happening. It was pretty full on. And so that started me on the journey of very severe anxiety mixed with a bit of depression over the years. So I think I was predisposed to respond to life in this way. But I think the saving grace was that I had to get up and go to work, because I just started, I'd set up my office and I had clients, and even with my heart jumping out of my chest, I went to work, and I think that speeded up my well-being, my recovery, because I proved to myself that no matter how I felt, I could still get things done. And once I got involved with what I was doing, then I didn't notice the anxiety as much. So I started to recognize that a lot of this was about where you focused. And in retrospect, when I went to that big event, I also realized that what I was telling myself was, who the hell do you think you are? You're no one. All these people are famous. You little upstart, you're not going to get anywhere. So that's two examples of very typical anxious thinking, of catastrophizing, predicting the worst, beating up on yourself, looking only at the glass half empty outlook on life. And it's the thinking that creates this. Believe it or not, people think it comes from out of nowhere, but you can't feel anxious without an accompanying anxious thought. So given that, the greatest work in recovery is about addressing your thinking, and that's something that needs ongoing commitment until it starts to feel natural to support yourself rather than scare the hell out of yourself. So that's the main ingredient. So the new book, sorry, were you going to ask me a question?
Because you have a beautiful illustration behind you, which was absolutely gorgeous. But did you find, were you, when you were a child, really interested in drawing, or had a natural natural talent of the illustration, because I love illustrations, but I'm not by far have that talent that you have or many other have with the drawing. But I love looking at illustration. But I'm curious, for our listeners tuning in, was that something that started as a young child?
Yes, always drawing, writing, and living in my own imagination. And I actually wrote a novel. I use the term very loosely when I was 12, which was some unlikely tale of horses in the outback where I'd never been, and for some reason it was called Oak Valley, which really didn't fit the geography at all. But it was fully illustrated. It even had a colour centerfold, and I've still got it. But yeah, I think a lot of people are too intimidated about their creativity. You're doing it because it feels good. Doesn't matter what anyone else thinks about it, So, I wasn't formally trained. I did a couple of years of college, but I did photography as a major back then. And I've often thought, I was talking to someone the other day about the fact that here I am with 17 books and seen as an expert, but I have no letters after my name. Wow. And I said, I've often thought, what happened there? Why didn't I get to go to university? I was certainly capable of doing that. And she said, does it matter? And so we're always comparing ourselves with those we think are more successful and they've got their act together. And really, if you're following your heart and your passion, you'll find a way.
Yeah, I mean, you're helping thousands and thousands of people globally with all of your books and work, and all of the books are always on the shelf here in Australia, and so many people are picking them up and finding comfort in your 30 days. You talk about the 30 days with the depression, and you have the teenager book out now of the anxiety, but in there are so many beautiful illustrations that bring it to life. And I love how you choose one thing. So you don't bombard your readers with things that are sort of overwhelming, that you even make your readers more stressed out about, reading. So it's quite an enjoyable, easy read. It's very relatable.
Well, I recognised very early on in my own case, when I was going through the worst of it, that when you're overwhelmed to that degree, you're not taking anything in. And so being an illustrator, I was actually doing little visual clues for myself, little visual reminders and reassurances. You'll be okay, you'll get through this will pass, and so on. And it got me through the worst days. And that's how the first book came to be, that I was actually writing it for myself, and probably is true for all of the books. And I created a character called It, who represented a voice of anxiety, that inner critic. You're going to fail. What if they hate you? What if you make a fool of yourself? So on and so forth. And it was a way of bringing him down to size. Instead of this big dark force, it was actually, he was more annoying and naughty than evil and overwhelming. And it it's my tablet, ignore that. And it has become an interesting character that, like a lot of people in the early stages, I thought anxiety, you wouldn't reclaim your life unless you got rid of your anxiety, and so get rid of it. And so he took on then the dimensions of some sort of monster that you had to fight. But I think that's a real mistake, because it is you. And actually, it is just a part of you that you keep telling to look out for trouble. So poor old It isn't getting any opportunity to rest because you're telling him something scary is out there, so he's got to go looking for it. And part of the inner critic is that's there because it doesn't want you to make the same mistake again. So it's actually looking out for you, but overdoing it. Whereas it really is just a part of you that's quite vulnerable. And instead of you being afraid of it, needs you to be the one who soothes it.
Mm.
So I find a very common factor with people with anxiety is low self-esteem and a tendency to look outside of themselves for reassurance. So, and to tell you you're okay, we're constantly comparing ourselves. And what happens then is you give other people power over your well-being. And really, they don't want that power. It's not their job. But you give it away to someone else when you make them an authority on your life. You turn them into your parents. And so a big part of this is becoming your own best friend, your own confidant, the one who says good on you instead of you're an idiot.
Yeah.
And so the relationship with self is really crucial. And it must be a kind relationship because, after all, in the end, the one you spend 24/7 with is you. So.
Wow. Bev, can I ask, we're in times now where we're always like, we're on social media. There are so many coaches in the world, so many authors, so many artists, so many models, and the list goes on and on.
Yeah.
And it can be easy to compare ourselves because now we have access to everybody's business or everybody's work, whereas, say, 20 years ago, we didn't have that accessibility. So as creators, we weren't comparing ourselves as much with people around the world. Could have been our neighbours or family friends, but not to the scale it is now. To build our self-esteem, do you have any tips for someone who's feeling really anxious on how they could build their self-esteem?
Well, firstly, I've got a book on that very subject called I Love Me. So, and I wrote that specifically for this whole issue.
Wonderful.
But there's a couple of things about what you're saying that strike me is, why are we in a competition?
Mm.
You know, why instantly this idea that we've got to compete with someone else? Just accept what they do and accept what you do, and there's no competition. There's room for everybody to enjoy what they do and be good at what they do. And I think, to me, the definition of recovery for me was, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid that you can hurt me or that you're better than me. I'm going to accept you as you are, and I'll accept myself as I am. And then the fear goes out of it because we're not really, as I say, we're not in a competition. It's not a race. And there's room for everybody to be who they are and be accepted for that. But it starts with accepting yourself. That's the key.
That is incredible words of wisdom. Because I agree, once I took that approach on also as a creative, it changed everything. It meant I could have beautiful relationships with other like-minded women in health and fitness and writing and other authors, and it was so amazing. So, Bev, you have written so many books about anxiety, depression and everything. But when you first came into this genre, it wasn't as fashionable as it is today or as talked about. Like, children are now going to school and learning about anxiety, learning about meditation and breathing, and we openly on media and social media talk about self-love. People are openly sharing their stories about living with anxiety or depression. And whilst the mental stigma hasn't been completely eradicated or broken yet, it's still, we've moved so far compared to, say, 40 years ago. I mean, it must have been hard for you at the time to, as they say, come out and talk about it. How did you overcome the conversation? So maybe if someone's out there but they're still really scared of telling people how they feel, whether that's their mum or dad or or friend, do you have any tips if you're feeling scared right now about how you feel, apart from seeing your doctor, they say, or seeing a medical profession? Is there any way, you know, when people say, how are you feeling? We might say, yeah, good, really good, thanks. Typical Australian, really good, thanks. But meanwhile, we could be feeling really crap. Any tips for someone in breaking, I guess, the silence? And in particularly for men who aren't very good at, they say all the research relates to men where they're not as good as opening up as women like us. Any tips on that with your experience over the many years?
Well, I don't see it as a character flaw, and I think we need to start thinking in those terms. And I've got news for you. Everybody gets anxious and everybody gets depressed. It's just a matter of degrees. And everybody is vulnerable, and it's just a matter of degrees. But, you know, if you're not handling things, it's important that you own that, you know, like if you keep trying to push through and you're struggling, then you start to get really caught up in the anxiety itself. Instead of it being secondary, it becomes then everything, the whole focus. So the sooner you sort of recognise, look, I'm getting a bit overwhelmed here, and reach out to someone who can guide you in the right direction on that. I mean, not everybody's a natural counsellor, so don't be put off if you tell someone and they go, don't know what that is, or what are you worried about, or whatever it is. If you're not getting the response that you need, then find someone else who has some wisdom about them, and don't just sort of choose the first person. It's going to need to be someone who has some empathy. But I think the thing I keep encountering, and it annoys the hell out of me, is this message of mental illness. We'll jump to that so quickly, when really someone's just a bit shy. Social anxiety, they're just a bit shy, they're lacking confidence. Or anxiety, they've probably just whipped themselves up into a frenzy on it with their thinking as a matter of habit, or they might have been taught to respond to life in that way. So, you know, the minute you put mental illness on something, you turn the person into a victim, and you turn them into someone who is quite helpless to do anything about it. And in the 28 years I've been working with people, there is always something you can do about it. And most of the time, sorry about this voice, it's a bit croaky today.
That's okay.
Most of the time what's happening is that the person is trapped, and I don't mean offence here, but most people are trapped in being a child. And I'm deliberately leaving a pause there for people to think about it, because if you think about the thinking that goes with anxiety, it's very childish. You know, what will they think of me? What if I fail? What if, you know, nobody loves me anymore? And you know, I've always never totally, absolutely, completely, those big blanket statements. And when we recognise that without criticising ourselves, just recognising, gee, I am sort of being a little kid here, then we can pull on the adult self to come and sort of say, all right, kid, I've got your back.
Yeah.
After you. And if I haven't spoken up on your behalf, and I've found myself in a situation where someone's taking advantage, then the adult me will step in and actually speak up for you. And that's a process that I use in my workshops, sort of halfway through. It takes a bit of work. You've got to go back and rescue that little kid. But essentially that's all that's happening, is you need to kind of step into your adult and become resilient, because life, you know, there was a book out quite a few years ago, that made me smile a bit, because it was called Highly Sensitive People. And I thought, well, good luck with that. you can be as highly sensitive as you like, but the world isn't going to tiptoe around you if you are, you know. And so it's a matter of you being able to take on the world and bounce back without getting overwhelmed. And that takes some learning, but it can be done. And again, it's about stepping into the adult, not exaggerating, not catastrophizing, staying in the present. Stop fortune telling about the future. Take it one day at a time and breathe.
Yeah. I was going to say, Bev, like children in high school they're taught so much now about mental illness.
Yeah.
And what happens when you get depression and what the outcome is, which isn't always a good outcome. So what I really love about your book is it's showing that you can work through it, you can get through it, and here are some tools, strategies, and exercises and things you can do. So I would totally recommend all of our listeners tuning in to get onto your site, have a look at your books. Bev, how can they get in touch with you and continue this conversation and sign up to your newsletters and look at all the incredible books, the 30 Days, 30 Ways to Overcome Anxiety, 30 Days, 30 Ways to Overcome Depression, because you're serving up tips of how to get through it, and you really dive into thinking you're not good enough, worrying what other people will think, and turning all of that around.
Yeah. I'm not big on the victim.
Yes. You know? Yeah, I love
essentially I'm saying I believe in you. I believe you have the strength. I believe you're not collapsed, that you can, you just find your feet again, and it's up to you, though. There's a commitment to self, and once you've made that, then you can get well.
Yes, and you're doing site counselling as well, Bev.
Not at the moment. I've got too much on the plate at the moment.
You're writing another book, aren't you? And getting it out. Wow.
I just had an American publicist want to take me on board, and he's doing books like Tuesdays with Maury and Chicken Soup for the Soul. So this
Congratulations, Bev.
seriously big deal.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
So I'm a little bit, oh my God, I wish this was 20 years ago. I'm sort of getting a bit on for this.
No, your work
in terms of energy. Yeah.
Your work
is very exciting.
Yeah, that is super exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank
it's
you.
so great to see an Aussie author too. They often say you've got to make it in America. To be
years ago when Oprah was on, I actually sent her one of my books thinking, if I can just get on Oprah. I mean, we're talking the 90s, but here I am now, finally at the end of my career, the last years of my career. But,
what a gift.
Anyway.
It's a really good message to everyone out there who might be working on their writing, their books or their career or their hobby or dream, that just keep going. Just keep going, and then when the timing's right, the universe will everything falls into place, and divine time.
And those going through anxiety, back there walking around Sydney Harbour, I thought that my life was over. I thought the quality of my life was going to be ruined forever. There you go.
Wow.
So,
incredible. Yeah. Now, Bev, before we say goodbye, how do you keep yourself healthy and well? Because you got so much on your plate. You're writing books. You've just got picked up by a US publisher, which is incredible because we're in a global pandemic and crisis, and the amount of anxiety is through the roof. But people are openly talking about how they're feeling, which is a good thing. But how do you take care of your own self?
I think the magic word is no, and we don't exercise it often enough. We're so afraid of offending someone or, getting offside with someone. But if you have faith in yourself, you can say no, but people will hear it in the best way possible, that, you know, you're actually coming from a good place. Intention is everything. But I am a little guilty of, that's my weak point, I'm a bit of a workaholic. But then again, the work demands are pretty incredible. I need sort of 5 clones of me to do everything, including putting out the bin and walking the dog. But I make sure I can have the weekends off. I don't, and I do enjoy a good streaming session. I've been doing a lot of that.
Oh,
The
wow.
Crown starts again tonight. The Crown. That's very good series.
This is incredible. Well, I'm such a huge fan of your work. I really love it. Every time I'm in Targets or Kmart or Big W and I'm in that self-help section, your books are there, and I keep recommending them to people that have family at all ages, children, mothers, because there's just so many incredible tips in there that can help all of us. And I really love how you take it from you can do it, you can get through it, it's okay to have this emotion, you know, you're not mad, you're not crazy, you're not loony, which when I grew up in the 1970s in Australia or the 80s, anyone who had a mental illness was, you know, they've got to go to Ward 10B, they're crazy, they're mad, they've lost their mind. And so even for me, even in my 40s, it's still, whilst I'm breaking the cycle of talking about, I believe we all get depression and I believe we all get anxiety. And why I know is when I lose a family member, I feel deeply depressed, deeply sad. Or when when we had to sell the family farm, deeply depressed, deeply sad. So I do believe we all experience it, but I don't believe we've completely gone mad and need to be locked up like in the old days that they said you got to be locked up, you know, in a room, throw the key away, you're mad. So we're still breaking the cycle, and I wish they, you know,
the crucial thing is to lose the shame about it, you know, there's no shame about this. And it's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
Such a big deal, but really what it is thinking that's not discipline. And you know, we need to just rein it in and really see it for what it is, which is exaggerating most of the time and in the worst, and again that child thing. So
great. And Bev, we're coming full wheel because I see a lot of brain now, neuroscientists talking about brain health. I'm seeing a lot of psychologists as well as the work you do where they talk about emotion, how it's normal to feel emotions, how these are normal, and then more about the brain health. And when we look at it from an organ, it takes also a stigma away, you know, like, so incredible work you're doing, Bev, incredible work.
Thank you. I mean, what emotions are driven by what you're thinking about.
Yes.
And so you think in a negative way for long enough, it changes the brain chemistry. And so that's why there's so much focus on getting your thinking right so that the brain can right itself and start making more feel-good chemicals. And then you start to feel better. So it's not just positive thinking for the sake of it. You're actually changing the way your brain works. You know, it needs to be wired for feel good.
Yes.
Well, and it comes down to a simple decision. I can tell myself this stuff, or I can tell myself something that makes me feel better.
Love it. Love it, Bev. I could talk to you all day about your work. It's incredible. I will get you back on the show sometime late next year just to continue this conversation. But all of your books and work and things that you've learnt along your journey is such a gift during this pandemic and this crisis, and can help so many who are in lockdown. especially in feeling, sometimes they tell me they feel like they're in house arrest, especially the people in London at the moment.
Yeah, well, Melbourne certainly went through it, and I've just done a book called Cruising Through Calamity for that very reason. And it's not just the COVID crisis, although that has its unique lessons, but it's for people with anxiety faced with a big challenge, like it might be a financial crisis or it might be a health crisis or whatever it is. So I wrote that in 3 months, and it'll be out in January. So,
oh wow! Can't wait for that book. I can't wait for that book, and I'll include it in the Spirit Girl Books Club. But your work is incredible, Bev. Thank you so much again for spending the time with myself and the rest of the Spirit Girl community. We have everyone tuning in from Singapore to Asia, to London, to Australia, to the US, and all really interested in how they can feel better from within and take control of their own thoughts and thinking to create a much better life for themselves. So thank you again, Bev. And now if we can find out more about you, Bev, and stay in touch with you, what's the best website for you, Bev?
So it's Bev Aisbett, written as one word, artofanxiety.com.
Wow.
So the art, it relates to that, but it's also to get yourself so anxious you're not coping is an art in itself. So
I love that. That is incredible.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you're just an incredible woman. You're doing so many incredible things. Australian of the Year, Bev Award, because of the dedication you do, the dedication that you give to others. You're really so passionate about helping others. And I say that because you wouldn't be writing the 17th book if you weren't. And sticking with publishing and writing, because I've only done one self-published book, and OMG, that was a lot of work in itself, and the amount of editing and stuff that goes in, it's completely different to just having a conversation like this today. So thank you again, Bev. We will say goodbye now, and thank you to all of our Spirit Girl podcast show listeners. I truly hope you loved listening and finding out more about Bev Aisbett, who is an incredible, incredible Aussie author, self-help author who specialises in anxiety, illustrations, depression, all kinds of real life things. On that note, I will see you on the next podcast show. Be sure to subscribe, to leave a 5-star rating and review, and to tell someone you love to. Until then, be yourself. You're beautiful. Bye for now.